Forget everything you know about medieval kings who lived for glory and gold. Our story begins with a prince who spent the first half of his life terrified of ever wearing a crown. This is Edward, later known as the Confessor, a man born to rule but called to sainthood. Edward was the son of King Ethelred the Unready and Emma of Normandy. Life for Edward wasn't a fairy tale. It was a constant, terrifying political thriller. In the year 1016, when he was just a child, the Vikings, led by the fierce, not the great, smashed their way through England. To save his life, little Edward was shipped across the sea to Normandy. He spent the next 25 years in exile. Think about that. A quarter century living on foreign soil, watching Danish kings occupy his throne, waiting for a chance that seemed increasingly impossible. He wasn't trained as a knight. He was trained in quiet piety. He was a prince, yes, but a forgotten prince, finding his only true comfort in prayer and the solace of the Catholic faith. The political maneuvering, the violence, the constant struggle for power, Edward saw it all from afar, and he wanted absolutely none of it. This exile wasn't just a political setback. It was the crucible that forged his soul, teaching him to rely on God rather than earthly power. When he finally returned to England at the age of 40 in 1042, it wasn't with a triumphant war cry, but with the quiet, hesitant humility of a man who was deeply unsure if the world he had left behind was worth returning to. When he arrived in England, the political machine instantly swallowed him up. The Danish line had failed, and Edward was the only legitimate Anglo-Saxon heir left. He was crowned king, but his first major test was purely political. He was forced to marry Edith of Wessex, the daughter of the powerful Earl Godwin, the real power broker behind the throne. This marriage was a total political handshake, a deal designed to secure stability and keep Earl Godwin happy. But Edward had a secret, a profound commitment to God that changed the game. Before the wedding, Edward and Edith made a radical vow. They would live together in a marriage of perpetual chastity. They would be king and queen in name, sharing a life and a throne, but they would remain celibate, dedicating their marital life solely to God. In an age when a king's primary duty was to produce an heir and secure his dynasty, this was insane. It defied all norms of royal power. It screamed of a man who saw his kingship not as a lifetime achievement award, but as a temporary spiritual burden. He chose holiness and sacrifice over the demands of the world. He was literally a king, yet he lived the ascetic life of a monk, using his power to build up the church, not his own lineage. This single act defines Saint Edward the Confessor, a king who deliberately chose the higher path, knowing the political chaos it would eventually unleash upon his death. The rest of Edward's reign was surprisingly peaceful, which was a miracle in itself, given the brutal politics of 11th century England. He was a gentle administrator, earning the title Confessor, not by dying a martyr's death, but by a quiet, unwavering confession of his Christian life in the secular world. While other rulers were focused on expanding their castles and fighting petty wars, Edward was obsessed with one thing: spiritual infrastructure. He took no interest in the lavish royal palaces. His real focus was on rebuilding the great church on Thorney Island, what we know today as Westminster Abbey. He envisioned a glorious sanctuary dedicated to St. Peter, a place of profound prayer that would be the spiritual heart of his kingdom. It became his magnificent obsession. He poured his royal wealth not into armies, but into stonemasons and architects. He was so devoted that he often spent more time in contemplation and planning the abbey than he did on affairs of state. His focus on justice was legendary. He had a deep compassion for the poor and sick, actively seeking out those in need and using his royal position as an opportunity for radical charity, not personal gain. When a king prioritizes building a house for God over building an army, you know you're dealing with something special. He literally made the most powerful city in England, London, subordinate to the spiritual power of his new abbey. Edward's holiness was not just internal. God often allowed it to manifest externally through miracles. The most famous story involves a beggar and a ring. One day, as Edward was attending Mass, a seemingly ordinary beggar asked him for alms. Edward, having given away all his money, took the magnificent sapphire ring off his finger, a ring that was a royal symbol, and gave it to the pauper. Some courtiers grumbled, thinking it an undignified waste of a royal treasure.